A very good morning to all of you, and thanks for joining in today's session. I'm Parul Mittal, your moderator for today's session. I'm also joined by Madeline Steer-Thay and Arifa Parekh, who are also the She Leads Tech ambassadors to support this session. So allow me to start today's session with the acknowledgement. In the spirit of reconciliation, the ISACA Melbourne chapter acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. I'm going to talk a bit about She Leads Tech program before we kickstart our presentation. She Leads Tech is a women-focused program which works to increase the representation of women in technology leadership roles and the tech workforce. Powered through a vast global network of women IT professionals dedicated to support others, She Leads Tech provides women with mentorship, leadership training, and skills training to grow and excel within the industry. In 2021, ISACA has globally recognized She Leads Tech Melbourne as one of the outstanding programs within an ISACA chapter in the area of education, with the ISACA Innovative Chapter Program Award. She Leads Tech Melbourne is grateful to everyone who has been following us on LinkedIn, our speakers, and to participants of our initiatives, such as, of course, yourselves. So today's speaker, Lyndon Buzzy, is a leadership coach and a mentor. She's an MBA, an accredited human synergistics practitioner. After more than a decade in tech consulting for some of the largest firms in the New Zealand, Lyndon hit a point that you're likely familiar with. She felt stuck in a story that no longer fit. On paper, she had it all: a great home, an amazing family, a stellar career, promotions, and an MBA. But some part of her knew that there was more to life than constantly striving, people pleasing, and productivity requiring jobs, roles all the time. In 2018, Lyndon welcomed her second child and experienced burnout. A key part of her recovery was discovering a new sense of purpose. She decided that things needed to change for the better and to provide her children an example of a life led from courage, love, and hope. Along the way, one of her biggest challenges was answering the question, how can I be successful at work and be true to my purpose? And this led her to a new career in leadership coaching. So not taking much of your time now, I'll let Lyndon to take the lead. Lyndon, we are so glad to have you here, and let's go through the session, the presentation that you have for all of us today.
Oh, thank you so much, Parul, and thank you for the introduction as well. It's always really interesting when I hear that story back. It reminds me of a time a number of years ago when I was so focused on the kinds of things that I'm going to be talking about in this presentation today. They were thoughts about the expectations that I had of myself, both as a person at work trying to do my best in the business world, but also a mother, a partner. And I think sometimes as women, we can really put so much on our shoulders that it can be a real struggle. But today, my presentation is what I call safe thinking. And it's about some of these biases, some of these thought patterns that really prevent us from reaching our potential at work. So, as Parul mentioned, I really hope that you will engage with this conversation. I'm going to be posing questions to you, the group, because I'm here to learn from you as much as you're here to share what I have today. So please do feel free to engage, to ask questions along the way, and we'll take this as a group effort, because there are amazing people in this group that I'm sure we could all benefit to learn from your experiences as well. So firstly, in the last year to 18 months, Have any of you been feeling a bit like this? Physically and mentally exhausted? Unable to control your emotions at times? That's definitely been me. Mental distance, this is something which sometimes needs a bit of explanation. Mental distance means that you wonder whether or not what you're actually doing makes a difference, that you wonder whether what you're doing is providing value. Or cognitive impairment, that could be anywhere from just sort of feeling a bit fuzzy to actually having difficulty concentrating, all the way through to just having kind of like memory losses, memory lapse. So in the last year to 18 months, who of you have felt some combination of one or more of these things? Definitely me. Feel free to use the hand raise function. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people resonating with this already. Absolutely. And I fully expect that as well, because I don't know if there's a single leader that I've spoken to in these last couple of years who hasn't experienced this to some degree, mainly because of just the sheer amount of things that are going on at the moment. I mean, for a time, things were relatively stable and we just had, all of our life to worry about, whether it be our careers, our families, our passions, whatever else. But to have everything relating to the pandemic on top of that and world events, none of which we can control, that creates a lot of pressure. And so for those of you who do resonate with having experienced any of these things, they are actually the 4 characteristics of burnout. And if you score highly on, or if you agree with all 4 of these things, then you're characterized as being at high risk of burnout. And if you feel that way, you're definitely not alone. The statistics on this are pretty shocking. Now, this is from a study that was done here in New Zealand called the Wellbeing at Work study, done by Auckland University of Technology. And they've been tracking high risk of burnout over the last couple of years. And as you can see, back in May 2020, it was 1 in 9. Now, you'd think that would be bad enough, but just November last year, it was 1 in 3. Now, that shows us that there is a lot that's really getting on top of us. There's a lot of stress, there's a lot of uncertainty, and it can be really, really difficult to manage. Back when I left my work at EY and started out in my own coaching practice, it was actually during the first pandemic lockdown here in New Zealand. I could really see how much everybody was struggling with the uncertainty, with the inability to really do anything about their own stress response and their own ability to concentrate and really focus on what they needed to do. And I thought, this is a really interesting time to be able to bring some of those skills. But first, you've really got to understand what's getting in the way of some of these things. So I'm sure we can already imagine the damage that burnout can do within an organization, as far as not being able to meet your business objectives, not being able to have the kinds of high-performing teams that you'd want to be able to be fully engaged and innovating and creating all of the amazing new ways of doing things, new products, new services, new systems. So let's have a look and actually see a little bit more of what's going on underneath all this. Now, I'd highly recommend this article. It's called Why Organizations Don't Learn. And this is where I really got the language for what I had been seeing all around me. I'd seen it in myself and I'd seen it in others. And this thinking, even though it can really help us when we're at certain earlier stages of our career, it can help challenge and extend us, it has a shelf life. So I'll take you through what each of these things, the S, the A, the F, and the E, what they mean. And we'll talk a little bit about the benefits of each and then the drawbacks of them as well. So the first one, when I think about safe thinking, the first bias is a bias towards success. And you think to yourself, of course, we all want success, right? We want to achieve things. We set goals for ourselves. It feels really good when we can achieve those goals. So what could be wrong with the bias towards success? Wow, we'll find out. The A is for a bias towards action. And once again, you know, when we really feel that urgency, that wanting to perform and wanting to be productive, of course we want to take action. You know, that's the physical feeling of wanting to get things done and make sure you tick things off your to-do list. But what could be wrong with that, right? The third bias is the bias towards fitting in. Once again, I'm sure this is something that we've all felt the need to do. Like, we all want to be part of a team. We all want to belong and be part of a culture. And if I think about any team and any other people I've worked with, we all want to get on with each other. We don't want there to be conflict. And finally, the fourth bias is the bias towards expert. And I can't even think of a time throughout my EY career where it wasn't drilled into me the importance of building a personal brand, being the go-to person for something, being known for what it was that you did and the value that you can provide. So when I think of these as biases, these are beliefs that we are holding, which are part of the organizational landscape. No matter what organization I go to or which leaders I work with, these are like assumptions that are in the air that we breathe. They are a part of the way that we organize ourselves and set our goals and work day to day. And we don't tend to question them. And so that's what I really want to focus on today. It's on questioning some of these things, especially when we're thinking about how we want to integrate our own wellness and our own sense of satisfaction and our vitality for what we do with our ability to be productive and to be the successful kind of person that we want to be day to day. So here's the first bias, and this is the first question that I am going to put out to the group. So we'll start, if you can pop this one in your chat or your Q&A, whichever one works best for you. We all have a bias towards success. I'm sure we do. Because honestly, who prefers to avoid mistakes or failure? Yeah, I'm seeing a number of hands raised. Me too. Oh my goodness. If I could avoid every mistake, every failure, do everything perfectly, that would just feel so comfortable. And there would be no need to feel awkward. You wouldn't be worried about looking bad in front of other people. You'd feel confident in every meeting. Like, this would be amazing. When we think about it, the reason why I've called this out as a bias, as something which needs to be challenged, is because if we're avoiding mistakes and if we're avoiding failures, then that means that we're doing things based on our previous successes. So we're taking things which have worked for us in the past, and we're repeating those same things again. Now, what does that mean in terms of innovation and in terms of learning and in terms of like taking risks to try new things? These are all really important in our journey, because if we're just repeating what we've always done in the past over and over and over again, then we'll get to the point where we stagnate, or where the thing which has made us successful in the past no longer makes us successful again in the future. Something in the context will change eventually. Like, things will not just continue to be the same over and over and over again. So when we adopt these same successful strategies that we've used in the past, we aren't learning. We're not trying anything new. We're not challenging anything that's being done day to day. We're not innovating. We're not taking any risks whatsoever. And so as a person, we're no longer growing. So that'll mean that our sense of satisfaction in the work that we do is going to drop. When our satisfaction in the work that we do drops, then we're no longer enjoying it. We don't have the same kind of vitality. It just becomes same old, same old. And I'd really love to hear from anybody who's had this experience. Like, has anybody else had this feeling like you're just in Groundhog Day? Like you get up, you do your job, you kind of do it the same way because you know that that's what makes it successful. You go home at the end of the day and you know that tomorrow is going to be relatively the same, like might be with a different client or in a different environment or, you know, a different challenge, but you kind of get into a pattern about the way that you do things and approach things. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I knew I wasn't the only one here. And I talked to enough people to know that this is a pretty common occurrence. So,
Lyndon, we have a... Sorry. Yeah, so Lyndon, we have one question.
Yeah.
So the question goes like, how do you manage making mistakes at work and to be not being a reflection to bad performance?
Absolutely. So this is where part of it is to do with us and the way we think, and part of it is to do with our environment. And each person's environment is going to be slightly different. So think about it. What makes an environment feel unsafe to try new things? Does anybody have any ideas, any suggestions on what might it be about the place that you work which might make it feel too risky? Anybody who wants to jump in?
Sure. So, Baby, do you want to talk about it?
Alrighty, I'm not sure how to open my video though, but yeah, hopefully everybody can hear me.
Yep,
so I think
absolutely.
Yeah, to share with everyone, I think it's very difficult if the culture within the organization does not promote, people taking risks. I have experience in the past, being someone who always talk about what I have in my head, but the culture is not very welcoming of opinions of other people, especially if you are not of higher rank within the organization. It's been really challenging to have your voice heard.
Absolutely. And I've been in exactly the same situation, so I can completely agree.
Hi, Lyndon. Jalpa here.
Hi.
Yeah, I have been in a couple of situations, at least I can remember now. One is a recent one, like I'm trying to get into, leadership roles, and more often than not, the knockback I could get is like, you haven't been in such role before. So there's the bias towards that success. You haven't been successful in this kind of role, but unless you give me a chance and my work says otherwise, like I don't have any other feedback to go by to improve on my skills, but just that you haven't done that role, that's not good enough.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where, Baby mentioned about organizational culture. And the way that I think about culture is in terms of the actual way that people behave, the way that they talk, the way that they behave, not what the values say, not what the vision and mission says on the brand, but the actual way that people are behaving. So in Baby's example, I heard a real perfectionistic kind of behavior where mistakes are not tolerated, and it usually has some kind of negative impact on the way people are perceived, which can then reflect on their performance. And Jalpa, the example that you just provided, where people are not willing to give people a chance unless they've demonstrated that past history of success already. And you can really see how in these environments, they would impact the way that we behave. So this is always a two-way street. So the reason I think understanding these biases is really important is because then we can become aware of them in others, and we can become aware of them on the impact that that creates on us. And I know quite often there are these drives within an organization of like, let's be more innovative, let's do some performance improvement strategy, let's come up with more and more ideas. But if these biases and behaviors haven't been addressed, like if we're not willing to accept people to be able to make small, calculated mistakes, even in more risk-free environments. So even in a team, if you don't even feel like you can safely suggest your ideas just with your own team, then that's telling you something about the environment and about the culture of the place that you're working in. And it gives you a better understanding of your own expectations on yourself. So if I understand that this is my environment and this is what I'm working in, then I don't need to blame myself for the way that I'm being impacted, because that's going to create a feeling of stress in me. That's going to create a feeling of tension about, well, can I speak up or shouldn't I? And that's always a choice. Like these choices that we make about whether to express ourselves a certain way in a certain environment or whether we choose not to is always up to us. And I think that relationships play a really key part in this. So the kinds of relationships that you have with particular managers or particular teams become very, very important. Thank you so much for the contributions on that. And I'm really going to encourage others to share from their experiences as we go through the others as well, because I'm getting so much out of it already.
So Lyndon, we have a few more people who want to talk about their experiences too.
Yeah, please go
I
ahead.
think we are getting into the groove.
I love
it. So Asrar, you there? Can you talk now?
Yeah, hi. My name is Asrar. I work in information security. But also at the same time, I did my major in entrepreneurship and innovation management.
Oh, amazing. Love that.
So, you know, I can definitely relate with what you're saying, but I think it's also about, I work for a small business, a very small business, a micro business would be the right word for it. And I think it's juggling those commitments as well. So while innovation is definitely there, and I mean, in our organization, there's no limitation to innovation, but the problem is, and I mean, understandably so, it's a micro business. So, you know, it's more adaptive and more agreeable to pivoting than compared to a smaller business or a bigger business that, you know, so the issue then comes around is how do you prioritize or manage that? And particularly with information security, you have to do level 1 before you go to level 10. Absolutely. Otherwise, you've got other set of issues. So I think managing that part is actually very challenging when everyone is innovative.
Yes.
If that makes sense. I don't know, what are your experiences around that?
I can absolutely relate. I've worked in organizations where there has been a lot of innovation going on at the same time. And so because different teams and different business units are all trying to successfully drive their own agendas, you tend to get a proliferation of all of these projects doing things in their own ways in different areas of the business, and trying to enforce any kind of consistency or any sort of standard across those as being perceived as slowing things down. And again, I think this is a bit of a balance between how do we make sure that information is available that project teams can consume, so that as they're going through their projects, they at least have an understanding of what some of those standards or expectations or the consistent things that we expect could be, so they can figure out what's actually applicable. So making that kind of information available and consumable, because you won't always be aware of all these projects as they're kicking around the organization. But at the same time, creating as many relationships as we can. Like I think in technology, a really big part of where I spend my time is just creating and deepening relationships with people in the business, with different project teams, project managers, so that the information about what they might need from me or what I might need to know about the decisions that they're making is a little bit more free flowing. Excellent. Any else before we move on?
Yes, just one last one. So Anna Fred, she just wants to
Yes.
talk about what Jalpa said before. So just in the continuation of that.
Yes, I think, Lyndon, you touched upon it. Relationships is key, and that goes, like, just wanted to add on to what Jalpa was talking about in terms of success and promotion. If not given a chance, how would you be able to get promoted? How would you be able to prove? So this is just an answer to Jalpa, and this is what I've learned very recently. Is to have those strategic relationships and strategic networks within your organization, and having those conversations on your aspirations would definitely help move up. At least your boss will have that in mind if you want to move up in your career. And the other part is also, even in your current role, if you showcase how you can go above and beyond, that's an important strategy for us to move up the career ladder. So even though you're not given a position as a team lead or as a manager, in your current role, if you operate at that next level, obviously people would definitely see and value that contribution and success.
That's wonderful. Thanks for that. And just touching on the concept of going above and beyond, because I can definitely see how those that are seen to be providing amazing value are sought after, right? Like the more that we can demonstrate what we can provide, it's just like a point of difference, I guess, compared to, it helps us stand out from the crowd, and it can really impress people. But you can get to the point where this becomes a habit, like going above and beyond can become a real habit, and it becomes kind of detrimental. This was certainly the case for me, because whenever I do something, I kind of can tend to go to extremes and not know when to stop. So is anybody else like this? Do we have anybody else on the line who finds it difficult to take breaks? And yeah, this is the bias towards action. Oh, I'm so glad that it's not just me, lots of other people on the call here. Does anybody want to talk a little bit about what is it? What is it about the way that we work which makes it difficult for us to actually take breaks and to constrain work within boundaries?
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Hi, Ranjini. Yes, we can.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all. It's been quite fascinating so far. And in terms of what we're just chatting about, what drives us, I think there has been, and I think someone's already commented that it potentially is a feminine trait. I think that's more of a sociological component to that females were pushed towards achieving far more because we're not paid the same, we're not promoted as much. So in order to be promoted, you've got to go over and above your male colleagues. Or if, and I can only imagine what it would be like for those who are gender neutral or who are transitioning or are transgender. That would be, I don't know, and I don't want to insult anyone by saying, oh, I can imagine. So I think there's that component to it, but also, and I'm speaking from a very Australian perspective, a very westernized perspective, the definition of success, be it at work or as a company. And we have defined and continue to define success by how much money is in the kitty, by how many conferences you attend, by how much you publish. And, you know, when we have these measures of success, and that's the only way in which a company rewards success. When you think about your performance indicators at the moment, what is it? What is it about it? If you're actually not getting rewarded financially, if there's a compliance issue, that means if you've made a mistake. So we actually reward not making mistakes, as opposed to saying, well, if you commit fraud, of course, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But if I accidentally or I, mistakenly forgot to follow a particular procedure, or, whatever the case may be, that's not necessarily is a bad thing, because perhaps, just perhaps, by not following that, you've highlighted that the system or the processes were out of date, or they recognized an issue that was from the 1950s or 60s, which are no longer applicable. So we're stopping ourselves from going forward by the system of rewards that we've got. So I have found throughout my career and in different industries, in different capacities, that the definition of success seems to be inbuilt into in a very westernized way, and it is driven primarily by how much money a company is making, and that filters down. And when you have that very narrow constraint, people overwork themselves, because how else do you get ahead? And I've been known to work really, really long hours, and I thought success was because I delivered on a project. And when you deliver consistently, it's an old adage. You always give busy people the work to do.
Oh yes, I've heard that one, and I've had it applied to myself many times. If you want something done, give it to a busy person.
Give it to a busy person, because what it's really saying is someone who's busy is driven, they've got a lot on, but they are willing to go the 10 extra miles that needs to be done.
Absolutely.
Because, and some of it is, I think, innate in us.
Oh yeah, and let's just talk about the stress response for a minute. Like if we're being, if our fight or flight response is being triggered by urgent, so many emails coming in, dings on our Teams and our, all these notifications, we're being flooded with adrenaline and cortisol, then of course we're just going to be focusing on reacting and doing the immediate next thing. So you're right, inbuilt and societally. I mean, many of the things that you mentioned come from the Industrial Revolution, which is now 100 years ago. This is a way of working that's 100 years old, and it was built for when we were trying to mass produce items at a consistent level of quality, whereas today we're undertaking knowledge work, and knowledge work requires time and it requires thoughtful consideration. When I think about what we're sacrificing by just being constantly switched on, constantly connected, constantly busy, and just on this treadmill, we're really sacrificing the time that it takes to reflect, to learn from what we've done, to consider and plan for what we need to do next, which would overall, like in the medium to longer term, make our productivity that much more, because we're focusing on the things that matter.
Exactly. And the other thing just on that is, I always say to my staff, you spend more of your waking hours with people whom you do not love, that is, people at work. Why do we do this? Let's make that productive. You don't have to love them, you have to respect your colleagues, but think about it in that sense. So why do you want to be connected when you go home, or when you switch off at 5 o'clock, 5:36, whatever your time is? Why do you still want to be connected? Why can't you give your quality time to people who you care about? Because at the end of the day, no one's ever written on someone's gravestone, here lies someone who loved to work and work like.
They were really productive.
Exactly. It was a productive unit. And just the language, and think about that when we define ourselves, we use economic terms. We are defining ourselves within the economic construct or economic theory construct of units. How much units? And it stems out of absolutely the Industrial Revolution. And so, when we're talking about why we push ourselves, it's really important to think about why as an individual you are, and listening to everyone's accents, etc. What is it that's driving you? Is it, you may come to Australia, or you've got families that have come, or you want to go ahead. A lot of people have asked, how do I go up the ladder? and think about your motivation and what part of your behaviors are being driven by that motivation. What part of it is driven by the culture? What part, and I mean the company culture, but the wider Australian culture. And one of the things, as a female of color with a non-Anglo-Saxon name, I can tell you the challenges that I have faced simply because of the things that I can't control, my biology, for one.
Yeah.
You know, we're all born the way we are. And unfortunately in Australia, and this is something we all have been, all have been chipping away quietly or not so quietly, whatever the case may be, is that ultimately it comes down to what is the dominant culture. And the dominant culture is predominantly stale, male and pale. And that is a reality. But it doesn't mean we're losing. It doesn't mean that you can't succeed.
Yeah.
You're beginning to see women, and you're beginning to see people at middle management and upper management. And so knowing that's the context, think to me, and I'm listening to the heartache in some people's voices. How do I get ahead? When I've got this again, I'm fighting. It's very
totally aligns to the next bias as well, because you're absolutely right. Our nature is to scan the environment, figure out what makes other people successful, and try to adapt ourselves to be like that.
Absolutely.
I've absolutely done that myself, and I can feel the tendency to want to do that, and I have to actively fight against it. Yeah,
it is. And I'll stop talking soon. Sorry, everyone, but I worked in financial services, etc. And one of the things that was really challenging for me was that I don't drink alcohol. And the first question I always got was, is it for religious reasons? I'm like, what?
Interesting.
It's like, no, I don't, because I choose not to drink alcohol. But it's that concept of fitting in. And so to fit in, I would have a glass of soda water with a bit of lemon in it. That's it. But I chose not to go down the drinking path because it's my personal choice. I don't judge anybody else. But it is that concept of when in that, particularly in financial services, it is a boys' club. And I don't play golf. I don't drink alcohol. So I really stood out. But it is highly pressurized for you to do that. I'll keep quiet now. Sorry.
It's all right, because what you're saying is completely on point. Because the environments that many of us work in have those sorts of unwritten rules, that in order to be connected, that you need to go to certain events, you need to be part of certain activities, you need to do things certain ways. And so we adapt ourselves, and we come across in ways which are inauthentic in order to be able to fit in. But what is the drawback of this? And I personally can tell you that after years and years and years and years of doing this, I got totally drained, and I just didn't even know who I was anymore because I was just adapting myself constantly to be a certain person in a certain situation, to please other people and to fit into certain expectations. And it got to a point where I could see that the health and the wellness impacts on me was so much that I just couldn't do it anymore. And then figuring out, well, what's my purpose? What am I here to contribute? What's my point of difference? What are my unique strengths? And how can I use those within the system, within the context, to differentiate myself while achieving results? And like from my perspective, being able to build really meaningful, deep relationships with people, really get to know people's needs and wants, get to know their drivers and desires, and to be able to communicate in ways which can influence. These were things which I learned that I had as a point of difference, which other people didn't necessarily have. Like for me, it just felt natural. It was something I took for granted. But when I started to be able to use these skills, I started getting attention because I wasn't doing things the same way everybody else was doing, but I was getting results, and they were like sustainable results. it was still a bit of an interesting journey when I was working within organizations, because you also come up against resistance when you aren't operating towards the status quo. So I just want to put that out there as well, that when you do start to bring more of your own unique differences, there will be eventually that sort of pressure from people who are conforming, who will expect you to conform as well. So I'm not going to say that this is always easy, and I'm not going to say that this is always, you know, bells and whistles and roses. It can be quite challenging, but it's an amazing part of your own personal growth if you're at that stage in your journey where you're really ready to start to put more of yourself out there and figure out more of who you are and your point of difference and how you can use that in a different way than what other people are doing. It's a journey that creates a new level of vitality while also opening up new areas of uncertainty. So there's both. Lastly, the E for safe thinking, the bias towards expert. Who loves to know all the answers and being able to tell all the answers and be able to be right? Oh yeah, Pearl, me too, me too.
The time.
Oh good, there are other people as well. Yeah, the experts, right? So this has just been a constant. And the really interesting thing is there's been some research done, the Transformations of Leadership paper by Rook and Talbot in the Harvard Business Review. It had a look at a whole range of managers to figure out what approach did they take when their sense of safety and certainty was threatened. So when they were put under pressure, or when they were put into a situation where there was a level of tension and it creates stress, like how would they react? And the majority of managers, 38% of managers and leaders, had a bias towards expert, which meant that they would go very logical. They would frame things in terms of their perspective, their knowledge area, and they would put forward the answers. They would be telling people rather than asking and coaching. And so if you've got managers or leaders who, when they're under pressure, they default to being the expert, being the one with the answers, being the person who tells everybody else how things need to go to be successful, then that's a very common bias. And just so you can see, the next highest one is achiever. The main difference between expert and achiever is that achievers are more collaborative. So they can bring different people together, they can appreciate different perspectives, and they can use those perspectives to work towards a common goal. Whereas experts are very much, they see things mainly from their own perspective, and they're much more linear, logical, like no emotional intelligence whatsoever. That's how these people can get when they're really under pressure. And I can see this in myself as well at times when I'm under so much stress and I feel like I don't have time, I've got urgency on my plate. I'm just like, this is how things need to go. Duk, 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 duk. So it's something to be aware of and something to challenge, because what's happening when we're being the expert, when we're the ones with the answers? Again, are we learning anything new? Are we growing? Are we encouraging the others around us to learn and try new things? No, we're not. We just want them to do the tasks that we know will get us to that successful endpoint. And I guess talking about these biases, wherever you're at in your journey, I know one thing for sure, and that's that throughout our lives, we keep changing. So no matter what stage you're at, whether you're still earlier in your career and you're still learning your expertise, you're learning what the rules are in your environment, and you're doing what it takes to grow and flourish in that environment, that's amazing. Just know that you will probably get to a point where there's a call in you for change, for growth, for doing something different, for wanting to change some of those policies and practices that have been in place since the 50s, for wanting to lead in a different way. And just know that when you feel that call, that's a normal part of development. That when we reach a place of mastery, like when we kind of have a good handle on how things need to go, then we will automatically want to grow and to change things and to do things differently. So just expect that's going to continue to happen. And if, like me, you come to a point where you've used all these strategies, like you've done what it takes to be successful, you've been the person who's going above and beyond, you've fitted into the nth degree, you've been the expert, and then you start to feel worse over time, just know that these things are catching up with you, and that there may be the need to revisit the way that you do things and potentially figure out different ways of being successful, or find different environments where who you are can be accepted. And I know they're out there because I have worked with companies that are more flexible and do things in different ways. So what's the solution? Well, I don't know what your individual solution will be, because my belief is that everyone is unique. But I do know what my solution was, and I'm happy to share it with you. So I experienced burnout when I was 35. I had my second child. I was still trying to do all the things, be all things to all people. And physically, it caught up with me big time. And it's taken a number of years for me to make changes that I needed, both in my own health and well-being, mentally, in my beliefs and assumptions, and also the way that I live with my family, in my work that I do. But what it came down to was these 4 things. And in contrast to safe thinking, you can see this as growth thinking. And it doesn't always feel safe. And quite often I feel like I'm putting myself out there in ways which feels quite vulnerable, but it always feels worth it because it feels authentic. And even though it's risky and I don't know how others will react, that will at least give me good information about the environment I'm in, the other people I'm working with, and whether that's the right place for me to stay. So the first is purpose. Knowing my purpose and what I'm here to bring has given me a level of vitality so that I know, when I wake up in the morning, I know what it is I'm here to do. I understand my contribution and my strengths, and I know the kinds of people that I can help. And when I actually do the work, which brings my contributions to the people that need me, it feels amazing. It feels like when I work throughout my week, I'm actually getting energy from what I'm doing rather than being depleted. So purpose has been a key one, and it's one that I help a lot of people with, because I think sometimes when we're just focused on delivering tasks, we kind of forget our own purpose and what it is that we're here to be and to bring. The second is clarity. So quite often when I start to get into that sense of busyness, of just needing to get things done, tick things off my list, I need to step back and take even just a short amount of time, maybe just 10, 15 minutes, to breathe, to center myself, and to really get clear on what should those priorities be. And who knows, maybe they're changing day to day, week to week. Or what information do I need to be able to understand what my priorities are? So getting that sense of clarity for myself just enables me to relax, and it enables me to clarify boundaries. So now when I do contracting with organizations, I set very clear boundaries up front, which say, I can work between 9 and 3, and I can't work outside of that because of my family commitments. And if you want to work with me, then that'll be great. And if you can't, if you can't be okay with those arrangements, then that's okay. I'm not the person for you. So yeah, just having real confidence around what it is that we need to do, us personally, versus what's for others. Connection is the third one. And again, the relationships that I've created have really created the safety for me to be more of who I am. So I have coaches and people in my peer network that I connect with regularly to talk about challenges I'm having or the ways that I'm reacting to certain things, so that I can find a sense of what's the best way forward for me. So it could be coaches and mentors. It could be, I always make sure to build really good relationships with the people that I'm working with, and be as honest as possible as I can be about what I can deliver, what I can't, what the challenges are, and yeah, make sure that those relationships are able to support you. I soon found out that one of the reasons that I decided to leave one of the organizations that I was is because it seemed like the connections between people were breaking down and everyone was becoming very isolated. And so now for me, that's a little bit of a sign of an environment where there's not a lot of security for people if people are feeling really like just bunkering down. So yeah, connection. And learning. By now, you would have seen that I have a passion for learning. And the 4 biases of safe thinking are all things which prevent us from learning. They actually stop us from learning anything new, trying anything new, doing anything new. And while that keeps us feeling a sense of security and is very valid at certain times of our year, in our career, and at certain environments, sometimes we just need to do that. If you're feeling the call, and you'll know what it feels like when you're ready in your own development to try something new, then that becomes really important. And so whether it's learning in your own time, learning about some new aspect of where you see yourself going in the future, whatever you can do to keep things interesting for yourself and to keep yourself growing. On Saturday, I just started a creative writing course because I wanted to have a different kind of creative outlet. Like a lot of what I do can be very analytical. So having a creative outlet where I could try like using different skills and having different kinds of experiences, learning new things, that's what keeps us growing. That's what keeps us energized. And it can really contribute not only to the work we do, but to those we love. We want to bring more of who we are, because then that means we've got more energy to give to others. Cool. Well, I'm going to leave it at that because I know that we're coming close to time. I'm not sure if there are any other questions. Parul, where are we at?
Yeah, so not many questions, actually no questions for this topic at the moment. In the interest of time, we'd like to end the session, but what an insightful session. Thank you, Lyndon. Appreciate your time here and everyone else's time too. Yeah, so I think it takes time to move from point A to point B, I think, and it just constantly thinking about it and reminding ourselves about it. I think that's the gist I could get out of the session. So yeah, so She Leads Tech Melbourne and the organizing committee from SACA Melbourne, SACA Sydney, and AWS would like to thank our book sponsors. So one of the books that we are getting is from Holly Ransom. The Leading Edge is the name of the book. And Holly is a globally renowned content curator, powerful and master interviewer with the belief that if you walk past it, you tell the world that it's okay. And Holly has been recognized as a LinkedIn influencer and a must-read content producer by the Australian Institute of Company Directors. Yeah, so in this book, Holly explains how the stories and case studies are mapped into lessons for mindset, methods, and mastery. So yeah, it's a great book to read. The next one is by Craig Ford. Many of us may know him already. So Craig has been an author for the book A Hacker I Am, volumes 1 and 2, and the upcoming series Foresight. He's also a chairman for the Queensland branch for ASA. It's a book written for everyone. It's not only for technical folks. So yeah, worth giving a shot. And it's a book that's especially not intended to read from front to back. You can pick up the chapters that interest you the most and start from there. The next session is around, just talking about the art of perspective taking. This is by Dr. Ehsan Sakni. Registrations are still open if you would like to join us in our next session. And thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
And have a
everyone.
good
It's
day.
amazing to hear from you.
Thanks, Lyndon. Thanks for your time again.